Yo, I'm Ham. I'm going to show you how to deal with this. So you got yourself a fancy pipe with your name on it. You partied it up, and now you want to clean it. I'm going to show you how to do that. So if you bought this kit from me, you got a pile of junk that looks something like this. If you didn't buy this kit from me, you're going to want to go out and get yourself a pile of junk that looks something like this. So first step here is going to be hot water. It's the most important step in cleaning a filthy ass bong like this. Now I don't know what your faucet looks like, but with all these bits and parts I think you're going to be able to figure out how to plug a hose up on there. Maybe if you got one of these, you're just going to be able to jam that shit up on there. Maybe you're going to be piecing together all these rubber sizers. Whatever you got going on, use all this shit. Figure out how to jam a hose onto your faucet. So I'm going to pull my hose out right here. Get ready for set jamming. Now I've got my faucet rigged up for easy jammage, but you might not. Looks like I'm going to jam it up like this. Bam, I'm jammed. Get some of this shit out of my way a little bit. Okay, so when you go to hook this up, you always want to run the water from the mouthpiece end and through it backward. Because anything with this many twists and turns, you don't want to inject this filth deeper into the system somewhere. So I'm going to plug this right on here. And I'm just going to have it hanging over the edge into the sink there. Go ahead and turn my hot water on. This is fun to watch. Ooh, there it goes. There's half my filth running away right there with that hot water. One thing that's going to make your bongs really easy to clean is keep them clean. Clean them often. If you party up on this all night, make sure you clean that shit the next day. So I'm going to let it run this direction for about 5 minutes, and then I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to let it run there for 5 minutes, probably flip it back and forth a couple of times. What we want to do is we want it to run long enough that the glass itself gets hot, and then the resin is able to melt off of that surface. As we just saw, most of that flushed away as soon as the hot water hit it. But I'm going to give that 5 minutes, come back, flip it, and on and on. Alright, so it's been a few minutes. I've flipped this back and forth a couple times. Now I'm going to get ready to move on to the alcohol step. Now I want this glass to still be nice and hot when the alcohol hits it, so I'm going to leave it here running at just a trickle while I get the rest of this ready. So I'm going to grab up one of these containers and this little aquarium pump here. Grab up my jug of alcohol. Now I need the pump to be submerged, but I also have to account for the amount of alcohol that will be up in the piece when we're running this, so fill that maybe halfway. Alright, so I'm going to turn this water off. Disconnect my hose, drain the water out of that. Now to get this water out, you're not going to be able to get it all out. But to get the majority of it out, I'm just going to blow on it good and hard. And there's most of it. I'll give it a couple more. There we go, and I've gotten most of the water out. Now that hot water did great, but we can see we still got a little bit of filth stuck up in some of these spots. Now right here on this ground joint, I'm not going to want to get my parts all gooey, so I'm going to go ahead and wipe that out with a touch of alcohol before I hook anything up to it. So in your kit here, should have a couple of hoses. One with ends like this. It's a little hose keeper there. And one with a ground joint, maybe even a cat clip. So I'm going to go ahead and plug this joint in. Now this is going to be the return. Once again, I'll be running the alcohol from the mouthpiece end. So this is just going to be the return for the alcohol. I've got that clipped in. Take my other hose, same hose I used for the water, plug that on here. On the other end, I'll take this, plug that onto the pump. Make sure my return line's in. Use this little hose keeper to keep everything in line. I'm going to go ahead and plug my pump in. Keep an eye on that alcohol level. You might need to add a little more. Looks like I do need to add a little bit. So now I've got the alcohol circulating through there. Same deal. I'm going to let it run this way for a few minutes, and then I'm going to flip it over and let it run this way for a few minutes. And I'll probably go back and forth a couple of times. Okay, so it's been a little while. I've flipped this back and forth a couple of times, and I think it's coming nice and clean. So I'm going to go ahead and empty this alcohol out of here. First I'll unplug the pump. Now I want to hold on to all this alcohol, so I'm going to hold this up and unplug the mouthpiece. And that'll allow much of the alcohol to just drain right back out of the system into the vessel. Hold it nice and high. Reclaim as much of that as you can. Now if you want to, you can work all of this through the maze and try to preserve every drop. That's not what I'll be doing right now. Now, just like with the water, to get most of this out, I'm just going to blow on it good and hard. Want to make sure and wipe the mouthpiece off so I'm not shoving a bunch of alcohol in my mouth. Now this piece actually came quite clean. This is probably clean enough to just move on to the final rinse. But I want to show you what to do in case you were smoking some real ashy weed, or maybe you didn't clean it the next day. Let's say you had some chunks stuck in there. How are you going to get these chunks out? Well, so I'm going to take my pump out of here, throw a cap on this alcohol. This first rinse alcohol, it's a little dirty, but you'll be able to reuse it for future cleanings. So go ahead and put a lid on that one. Set that aside. I'm going to grab up another container here. Now, if your pump looks something like this, and supposing I didn't already do it for you, we're going to want to gently, try not to break it, pull this little thing off, and pop this little doohickey right out of the way there. I'll put that back on, or you could leave that off, but you might want to put a rubber band around it to help hold those other parts in. However you want to deal with that. I'm going to pop this back in place, missing its little plug. Alright, go ahead and put all this back together. Just like before. Pour out another dose of the good stuff here. Took a little more than half last time. We go ahead and plug this pump in. Waiting for that to fill a bit. Might have to add a little more alcohol. Looks like I do. Okay. So I'll bust into this fine Red Cross table salt, non-iodized. I'm just going to go ahead and pour it right in there. Here it is. We can see it's starting to make its way through the plumbing here. Here it comes up into the piece. Looks like I can add a little more here. Now you're going to want the discharge tube placed in such a way that it stirs the salt up so that it can be taken up again into the system. So if you notice the salt piling up in one area of this catch vessel, just move the return tube a little to keep it stirred up. And here we can see the salt working its way farther and farther through the system. And just as I've done before, I'm going to let it run this direction for 5 minutes. Then I'm going to flip it over, let it run that direction for a while, flip it back and forth a couple times. Let's see the salt making it further and further through the system here. Looks like I could use a little more in there. There it is, cycling all the way through. You go ahead and flip this over to this side for a while. All right, I'll be back. So I've been running this salty alcohol for a while here to help get any remaining Klingons. If you noticed that anything got clogged up, the pump or somewhere in the line, just give it a little jostle, free it up, in case any salt was wedged up in there. But it should flow pretty good. You can see it's got good flow even with the salt. So anyway, I'm done with this salt step. Now because I've run salt through this glass and through the pump, they'll both need thoroughly rinsed with water. So I'm going to go ahead and set that up right now. I'm going to unplug my pump. Just like before, I'm going to hold it up nice and high, unplug the mouthpiece hose, and let that all drain back down into the reservoir. We got what we got there. So I'm going to unplug the return line, let that hose drain out. Now I'm going to need to flush it very thoroughly with hot water to get any of this salt. Salt will stick to the glass and permanently stain it, so you want to make sure to rinse it right away. So using all my same hoses, again hooked up from the mouthpiece end. Grab my little adapter here, jam it back on the faucet. You know how I like to jam it. And I'm going to get some hot water flowing through there. This is going to be the same deal. We'll run it this way for a few minutes, flip it, run it that way for a few minutes. You really want to thoroughly rinse this. Don't leave any salt behind. Now the pump motor itself will also be ruined by the too much salt sitting in there. So I'm going to put this in a fresh vessel, set it down in my sink, fill that vessel up with water, and just let the pump sit there and run. Switch it out for some fresh water here and there to make sure that you've thoroughly rinsed that pump. Fill my catch vessel up. And yeah, now I'm just going to let that pump sit there and idle, cleaning itself out. Get my water going through the piece again. And yeah, I'm going to flip it a few times, then I'll be back. Alright, I'm back. So it's been maybe half an hour. I've been rinsing this salt out. I've flipped this back and forth maybe half a dozen times, switched out the pump water a few times. I don't see any more traces of salt in the piece. Maybe a little spilled on the outside, but I think I'm pretty clean on the inside now. So now I'm going to move on to my fresh alcohol final rinse. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my water off. Same deal as before. I'll hold this up nice and high. I'll let you watch it. Hold this up nice and high. Disconnect from the sink. Let it drain out what water it will. I'm going to blow on it to get as much of this water out as I can. Maybe this side too. Now, for my final rinse, I'm going to need fresh, clean alcohol. So I'm going to take this, unplug my pump, get that out of there. That should be thoroughly rinsed now. Set the pump aside. Alright, now get this all set up again for its final alcohol flush. Pump. Untangle my hoses. Get my sink adapter off there. There we go. One end on the pump, one end on the mouthpiece. Get my return line back in action. Oh, better clear that of any remaining salt too. Give that a quick flush. plugged in, cat clip on my hose keeper here. Serve it up with some freshens. Plug that pump back in. Keep an eye on this alcohol level. I may need to add a little more. No, it looks like I'm pretty good. Now I'm going to do the same thing. 5 minutes this side, flip it, 5 minutes that side, so on and so forth. And then I'll be back. So here I am. Been running this a few minutes. Flipped it a couple times with the final alcohol rinse. Now I'm going to move on to the drying step. So just as before, I'm going to unplug this pump. Lift this up nice and high. Unplug the mouthpiece hose. Let it drain out what it will. Now you're going to be able to reuse this alcohol a few times, but each time it will get a little more water in it. Be aware of that. Alright, there we go. Okay, clip, return line. Set this shit down for a moment. Pull all these goodies out. And set this shit off to the side. I'll throw a lid on this for future use. Now, this is one step where you really will want to get what alcohol out that you can. Just like before, I'm going to get most of it out by blowing on it. Now, not everybody's a blowhard like me, but give it a couple tries. And you can see I still have some puddles going on. That's okay, you can dry this out, but the more you get out, the easier it'll be to dry. So if you take a look at the maze here, you can see that if I turn it end over end this way, I'll run the alcohol farther through the system that direction. If I were to turn it this way, it's going to run the alcohol this direction through the system. So pick a direction and just sit here and turn it a bit. Help walk that shit out through the maze. You can see as I'm turning it this way, it's gathering up toward this end, closer and closer to the ground joint. And you can see it draining out. I'm not going to worry too much about it. Now, if you got this kit from me, you probably have something that looks like this. I'm going to grab that up. Get my hose on there. Plug this shit in. Look on the bottom, make sure I'm on my high setting. Hook that up to the mouthpiece. Now, because alcohol was my final rinse, I probably won't have any problem with water spotting. But just in case, I want to make sure that I set it face up. So any water spots that may occur are going to happen in the back where it's concealed. So you can hear it bubbling. There's still some puddles in there. No worry. I'm going to leave this for the next 3 hours. Maybe I'll leave it overnight. Sooner or later, it'll end up dry and clean. So there you go. Hopefully you got this nice and filthy and had a chance to clean it out again. Stay tuned for my vids about setting up the display kit. Yo, update. So this has now been sitting here about 4 or 5 hours, and it is so fresh and so clean. Last thing I'm going to do, just kind of wipe the outside down. If you got any sticky shit, use some alcohol. I wanted to mention a couple ways you can speed up this drying process. While you have the air pump hooked up, you can run hot water across the piece. That'll hurry it up a bit. Or better yet, you can use a real damn air compressor instead of a goofy ass aquarium pump. You'd be able to dry it out in just 2 or 3 minutes. But not everybody's got a real damn air compressor, so I want to come up with a system that'll work for everybody, and this goofy ass aquarium pump will do the job for you. Just give it a few hours or overnight, and there you are, ready to go again. Stay vain.